Baby Beard Media presents a Roll to Cast RPG podcast in the world of Cyberpunk Red by R. Telsorian Games. Starring Christopher Bond as Wax, Ellen Graham as Sprocket Volkov, and Sean Flurl as Spitfire James. Story, GM, and additional rules by Phil Harker-Smith. Design by Jack Sumner. Music by Paul Goodman. This is Feed the Beast. Hello, welcome to Season 3 of Roll to Cast. It has been a bit of a while coming, and what are we doing now? Well, I can finally tell people, I've been itching to tell people for the longest time, we are doing a season of Cyberpunk Red.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, boy.
Yes.
And not this Jumpstart kit Cyberpunk
Not the Jumpstart
Red.
kit, no. We are doing a season of the full rules of Cyberpunk Red.
Hell yeah.
Which is crazy exciting. I'm Phil. I'm the GM for this season, Feed the Beast.
Hey, my name is Chris. I'm one of the players. I'm going to be playing Wax, but I'll introduce you to him a little bit later.
And what role does Wax have?
Wax is a netrunner.
Hey.
Very cool. We finally got to the net.
Very cool. Very cool. And I am Sean. I'll be playing our techie, Spitfire James.
Very cool. I'm Ellen, and I will be playing a nomad called Sprocket Volkov.
You might be surprised about, how are you
It's
doing
not
that?
out yet.
I don't have it. It's just been released, or it's about to be released.
Basically,
who
we
are these Australians
Yeah.
and how did they get
How
a
do
copy
they
of
do it?
Cyberpunk Red?
We're hackers.
Yeah.
We're really cool hackers.
I think I said
basically.
we're hacks.
We just made our own version.
We jumped inside of a kangaroo. We hopped all the way to R. Telsorian. We did a little, as you know, Cyberpunk 2020 was a big heist. We used that for preparation to make an actual heist to then steal Cyberpunk Red from under R. Telsorian's
As
nose.
we are drop bears, so
yes,
we can
Yep.
We dropped in, took out Max and Mike, and made out with Cyberpunk Red. No, it's not true. That's fiction.
Oh.
Sorry. Sean, how the hell did we get Cyberpunk Red before anyone else?
but through the skin of our teeth. But more to the point, we've had a lovely relationship with R. Telsorian because we did Season 1, which was their Cyberpunk 2020 system, and we thought, it's 2020, let's not do Cyberpunk 2020. So we put out the feelers, and we said, hey, what would it be like if we could extend our relationship, go the next step, and have a potential little sneak peek at the new game? And, we got to talking and with Jay, who is their social media manager, among a myriad of other things.
The media ambassador.
The media ambassador.
It's a lovely title, yeah.
Oh. And basically, he floated the idea of, well, what if we could get you a look at the real deal, the actual game? And so we talked about it, ideas flowed, and
we said, yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, mate.
Whatever.
Yeah,
I
if
mean,
you wanna,
if you're interested, we don't really care.
I was going to look at Cyberpunk Blue, but red will be fine.
That's the porn version?
Oh, I thought we were talking Pokemon here. We all know Cyberpunk Yellow's the best.
But yeah, long story short, because R. Telsorian trusts us for some crazy reason, they said, here's the actual game, here's what we can give you, and go nuts in the world. And so we've been hard at work very quickly to come up with this amazing thing for you.
Yeah, so at the time of recording, we've had the rules for a month.
A month?
Month and a half.
A month? About that?
What they sent us was the beta rules, essentially, which is their work in progress of all the different systems and how they interlock. The lore we got from the Jumpstart kit, which is a really, really cool. I think a lot of people enjoyed getting stuck into the Jumpstart kit. They kind of instantly sold out of copies when they sold at the con last year.
Yeah, Gen Con, I remember there was just apparently massive lines. I asked a friend, do you reckon you can get it? And she's like, well, maybe.
We get the digital copy of that, and we've played it ourselves. And I have to say the system has evolved a fair amount since then, for the better. There's loads of extra stuff, the rules are refined, and just speaking for myself, I've really enjoyed looking at what's in the book and what's possible. Red has got loads of extra new exciting things, And one of those things that really excites me is the net running. As Chris said, he's playing a net runner, so you're going to get a look of that during the campaign.
Because we didn't even touch net running in season 1.
No. We had a net runner in the story, and that was sort of a background thing.
Yeah, it was a lot easier to kind of like co-opt and net run it into your ensemble or something like that, as opposed to kind of like, I know looking at net running, I was like, I'm too dumb to do this. So I got fucking...
Can we just roll and say they did it?
It was its whole own minigame, but it could be performed by netrunners from home, essentially, meaning they never really had to leave the couch, which is something they've rectified in this. So the netrunner is right there with the team at all times, which is going to be really, really exciting. Chris, what was it like putting your netrunner together and looking at all the tools and kit that they have for you?
It's really cool. Netrunning in Cyberpunk Red is a really excellent extension of what Cyberpunk 2020 offers. Because you're in the thick of it, the characters have to be more complementary to the group, to an ensemble, and so there is less a sense of creating one character who just kind of sits outside and just does net running stuff, but has more of a collaborative teamwork group.
They have to bring more to the table than just the net running, right?
That's right.
They need to be able to defend themselves or, repair things, bypass stuff, or have social skills that are going to benefit the group, because they'll be alongside them and they're going to need those gaps filled.
Which is crazy as someone who has vertigo. The idea of overlaying two things on top of each other just sounds like the worst thing to have to deal
We're
with.
also like getting into that now, like Oculus Rifts and VR are becoming more of a reality than they ever were before. Like they were kind of just like a pipe dream in earlier years, but now people can actually go out and buy the consoles and use them and experience virtual reality in real time. So I think it's cool to have the Netrunner now. They're doing these things that we can at the moment visualize.
Yeah, it's closer to AR, so
Pokemon Go.
It is,
Go and stuff like
like
that.
augmented kind of,
reality.
Yeah.
So the Netrunner kind of goes with the team, and for people who might not have a copy of Cyberpunk Red, goes with the team and puts on little goggles and hacks into nodes and stuff like that, bypasses security. And
so they have to be within about 6 meters of a node. So they have to find the node, they have to get within 6 meters. They can do it wirelessly, so they can still do things like hide or shoot if they need to. And as you say, while you're in that net, it's overlaid on those goggles and you can still see the room around you and the ordnance or bullets coming your way. And as Mike said when we talked to him last year, there's a real interplay between the things that the rest of the team is facing and what the Netrunner's doing, because the Netrunner might be trying to shut down the defenses which are attacking him and the rest of his team. So there's a real blending.
Yeah.
Because, in 2020 it was very much Netrunner was the team member in the van.
Yeah.
Like, has to kind of be away, and so they can just fully focus on that. This is a bloody mind-boggling multitasking
It makes it
talent.
a lot more high stakes as well, because it's like, you're in the thick of it and you might have these characters who are doing like these tank things and going into gunfights, and you've got the Netrunner trying to do something as well as being shot at or needing to hide, and like the fact that it's divided into, net and meat.
Some cyber wolf in the net also trying to run at you.
It's indicative, I think, of all of the roles being fleshed out much, much more. And that is really cool. Another favorite thing of mine about what we've seen in the beta rules is the extension of all the role abilities and what you can do with them. Like for Nomad, for instance, when you're putting your character together, you had some really cool options.
Yeah, you can kind of choose what cars you have available to you. We're starting out rank 4, which is most Cyberpunk Red characters.
That's where they say to start out,
So that means you have a few like options on, you can get one car and you can kind of deck it out with a few things, or you can have one car and then have like another option. You can have land, sea, or air vehicles.
Yeah.
Which is just like,
why not all three?
Yeah, exactly. And you think back to, when we were in Cyberpunk 2020, I couldn't quite gel a Nomad in with the world just because it was so kind of city focused. Like it would be like kind of a Mountie almost. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like everything's operating in these apartments and small and city streets and things like that.
Yeah.
So if you think about a Nomad, it's just like, it seems like at such odds with the rest of the world, which makes sense because they're outsiders.
Yeah, it's like bringing a Mad Max character into Blade Runner.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like it would be nuts. And I'm
You're like, I want to see that movie now.
and I'm sure a lot of people have fun with like incorporating those two crazy different styles. I can also see how like people in Cyberpunk 2020 would have whole campaigns with just nomads. I could definitely see that. But it was in the world of Red, now that the nomads have been more integrated into society and like kind of rebuilding and reclaiming things, it makes being a nomad seem a lot more accessible, you know, using that in combat as well, which is like, if you're going to have someone with a vehicle, of course you're going to use it to like ram into people and do stupid shit.
and there's deployable spike strips, there's machine guns.
Yeah, you can like have flamethrowers and onboard machine guns. It's nuts.
It's just nice as well how you talk about nomads being integrated, because we know that nomads, even from an NPC perspective, we did not use nomads at all in mainstream, but they're so integrated into the lore of Red in the idea of the Elder Caldo family and everyone else being a part of like the rebuilding of the city and how they've taken over the highways. It's the nomad families are kind of the last bastion against the highway gangs and such. As you want someone to protect you.
Go-gangers.
Get the fucking nomads.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because it is a blend of kind of like, you know, if Cyberpunk 2020 was kind of all sleek and chic and cities and new tech, nomads have always been kind of like old tech. I mean, they're cars. They run on gas and petrol and these kind of things.
But it's pretty much the same
essentially,
thing.
Yeah, like natural kind of resources. Like you still have these new tech, but then you also have kind of communities and things. And
old tech and you know, guerrilla gardening and stuff that relies on sort of the old ways. So nomads are more nomad, the netrunners are more netrunners, and the techs are more tech as well. You
Good
had
segue.
Oh, thanks. I've been doing this podcasting thing a while. When putting together Spitfire, you also had like a bunch of options. How did you approach that?
It was interesting because I've had the map for this character in my head since we finished going mainstream. I knew that I wanted to test myself and do the role that is kind of least stylistically comfortable for me, for someone who runs a podcast and kind of helped set up this company. I'm not very tech savvy. So the idea was like, yeah, cool, let's go into this.
I take a spanner to it.
As the guy who assisted him in that, I can vouch for that.
But how does computers work? And so, you know, the voice came into my head. The idea was like, oh, I really want to explore the mechanics of what a tech can do, because I would go to Fixer was the first one. I would look at a solo. I'd look at, you know, basically the D&D equivalent of the fighter and the I put you on silent, sir.
Oh, fired.
You aren't good at tech, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, Spitfire's going to be a liability.
And so, yeah, looking at especially the maker role, which is the kind of the big thing for the techie, you can either have someone who, like I've gone through, is someone that works their technological skills in the heat of battle, can temporarily fix things while there's gunfire going, oh, this is broken. I'll probably need hours to repair it. Fuck it. Just quickly, this will work for about a minute. That's good enough.
Yes.
Or if you further Cyberpunk Red and look at a real kind of long season campaign, you could have a goddamn inventor. Someone, and they have a note in Red that basically says, this is potentially game breaking.
Yes.
So I loved that.
Yeah. Talk with the DM and, you know, don't just be like, I build a nuke creator.
Yes, yeah. I build the fat man from Fallout.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I like this challenge of being a character that is having to talk on the fly and work on the fly and is meant to be one of the smarter people in the room. So
you went sort of, so I think it's called field tech.
Yeah, he's a field tech, and he is
an
upgrade expertise and field expertise are the two ones that I went with.
Yeah.
It's kind of pumped my rank points into that just to make it all about in the now, in the moment, as opposed to long-term game.
We'll see how that plays out. And I think it's indicative of all of the options now that people get when making their characters. There are a couple of ways for you to build characters in Red. There are really, really simple ones where it's just a template and you just grab the template and it's yours. You roll on a table. Those are your stats and you can just go.
Go straight in.
Then there's like a halfway house where you can just sort of get your skills from a package and you have a bit more of choice about how you spend individual options. Yeah. And then there's your full package where every aspect of your character, you know, from the ground up, you can.
Which all three of us did that, didn't we? We all went the full hog.
Yeah, we've all built from ground up.
I really enjoy that they've made a few different settings for character creation.
Yeah.
Like, I like that there is an option for like, hey, you want to just jump into something? Go for it.
What if you just want to do a one-shot?
Exactly,
You know?
Obviously, we've been doing this podcast, but apart from D&D, like, my experience with role-playing games is kind of limited, and learning new systems for a lot of games can be quite daunting.
It can be, yeah.
Especially, like, D&D, like that's why I always like to... That's why I always like to play with really, really experienced DMs because, like, I'm not learning that whole fucking book. Are you kidding me?
You do
Are
it.
you kidding me?
And the DM's like,
it is like Les Mis. It is so thick and so, and I'm like, I'm sorry, no, it's a no from me. And so, like, I love all these things, but sometimes, like, having a thing of like, hey, do you want to just start off? And like that makes
just
it
jump in.
so much more
Yeah.
approachable because then once you've done that, you might get more interested into like, okay, well, maybe I'll do like a half-made one and I'll see tweaking this. And then you might get even more excited and go, no, I want to customize from the ground up. I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more accessible. And there are only 3 people in the cast, which means we're only going to get an in-depth look at 3 of the roles. But I think people are going to do a lot of really cool stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The exec role now has a bunch of rules about how you manage your employees and the benefits you get from your corporation and how loyal they are. And, you know, their loyalty depends on things like whether you've praised them that day or not, or if you've done something that pisses them off, which I think is excellent.
Because they can just leave.
They can just leave, yeah.
They get an offer from another company. You're like, well, I guess that's my fault.
Yeah,
they are.
And if one of them gets killed, they're like, oh, this guy's getting us into trouble. It's really good.
Yeah, boss, you didn't compliment me today, so...
Yeah.
And also, John died.
I
Consider that 2 strikes against you.
You as the exec have to be like, pizza party!
Your fixer, they've put down rules for like, if you're at this rank of fixer, who are the kind of people that you're going to be able to talk to? Who will you be able to find in what communities? And what sort of rumors are you going to be able to pick up? And I think that's really great. It's going to make people feel a lot more comfortable when they get into it. And as you say, it's going to be a lot more accessible. So I hope we get a really nice look at the 3 roles that we've picked, and I hope you guys are excited to see those and what we've done with them as well.
Particularly the lore.
Yes, well, the lore is something that I've
he's
been
excited.
I'm excited. I'm very excited. So the lore I've been working off is something that's available to all of you guys out there as well, which is the stuff that's in the Jumpstart Kit, the World Book, and it's really exciting. I love that stuff, and I'll talk a little bit in a second about how I've kind of run with it and tried to carve out my own little space in it. But the world is really different from any cyberpunk world that I've come across before, because it's this world that's in a bit of a transition state. So in 2020, everything, as you say, Ellen, is quite slick and corporations dominate everything and your punks are at the bottom of the ladder just trying to make a difference. We're not quite sure what the situation is in 2077, but by the looks of things, Night City is booming.
They came out on top by 77.
Yeah, by 77, things are back. Maybe, you know, still quite lawless and exciting, but you know, the city is back to a metropolitan powerhouse.
And it is super important for people to know that even though Talzorian had this game in the works before 77 was even brought up, they have worked tirelessly to integrate 45 as a canon representative of what will lead into the game.
Yeah, they've worked hand in hand as far as we can see. You know, I think they've spent a lot of time in Poland talking to CD Projekt Red and making sure their vision for what the continuation would dovetail with CD Projekt Red's idea. So as you say, it's 2045. It's somewhere between 2020 and the 2077. And what's happened is instead of having to overthrow all the corporations got into a little bit of a tiff. Arasaka and Militech got into a bit of a spat called the Fourth Corporate War, which was basically World War III and engulfed every major city in the world.
And it wasn't even like
But, you
their
know,
fight.
business
they
is
got
business.
hired.
Yeah, it was a proxy. It was a proxy war. Yeah, I think it sounds so silly and absurd, and I think it's totally plausible.
Yeah.
The things would just get out of hand, and greed means that no one wants to back down. They just don't. And Night City, as this amazing kind of heart of the Roaring Twenties, the world city, was hit hardest because Arasaka and Militech both had headquarters there, and the city was half destroyed when the bomb went off.
The fall.
The Night City Holocaust. And someone detonates a nuke.
Someone.
You know, feel free to explore. Someone detonates a nuke downtown, and the center of Night City, the corporate zone, is a wasteland. It's now the hot zone. And there's a diaspora. There's 2 million people are displaced and go into tent cities and the suburbs. And the next 20 years is just people trying to find their feet again and trying to live in this new world. The national governments say, all right, that's enough for Militech and Arasaka and pull them back into heel. The people are left to trying to pick up the pieces. And where we are today in 2045 is where as we say, the nomads,
the Aldecaldo family.
Aldecaldo family in particular have taken it upon themselves with a bit of corporate backing to say, let's reclaim Night City. Let's make it our own.
Because America said, well, President Kress basically said, well, that's your problem.
Yeah.
She's got enough to worry about. The United States is basically the eastern seaboard now, and everything on the west is doing its own thing. There's a loose confederation of states called the Pacific Confederation, but Night City is even sort of outside of that.
They're a free state.
Yeah, there's their own city-state. They get some support from the places around them, but people kind of like them being their own Wild West, their own kind of Casablanca, where, you know, you can get things done.
Yeah.
It's nearly lawless and your opportunities are your own. And that's the city we have, right? This rebuilding city that's where everything's up for grabs.
Yeah.
The stake that the inhabitants have in the world is much more direct. People can be much more enfranchised and in charge of their future. How do you guys respond to the world book?
My big thing, right, for me is, and I was thinking about this the other day, is I love, this is a weird analogy to use, The Simpsons, where Springfield is clearly a place in America, but it's not set where, and we just naturally assume it also exists within everything else. What I love is that Night City is a real place. It was Morro Bay, and the way that it's actually in the lore that it was set up, it's this little bay city that fell on hard times, and then Mr. Richard Knight basically bought up a lot of all the area and then had this really idealistic way that he wanted to set it up. And it's like, this will be awesome, and we'll make it great, it'll be idealistic, it'll be a hub, we'll economically enrich and everything.
Because utopias always end up
right,
don't
yeah,
they?
we'll get to that in a second. Yeah,
and he really meant well,
Yeah.
but basically through that he really pissed off a lot of the wrong people, and got killed for it, and the mob took over, and then the bastards were just like, oh, you know, it's such a shame he died, we'll call it Night City in his name. And then it just turned into Night City as we know it.
Yeah, I like that it has that real solid grounding.
Yeah,
in
that's
the
what
world.
I like.
History of it.
Yeah, it feels like alternate history, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And like what it
Yeah.
was meant to be, and then what it ended up being. Like it really, they had the best at heart, and it just fucked it up.
Yeah.
I think the best thing about Cyberpunk Red's world book and just setting in terms of what it does for players is it gives players opportunities that weren't previously available. I think, you know, if you want to play a game where you're under the heel of the corporate world, you can play Cyberpunk 2020, but if you want a world where you've got an edge, where you've got an opportunity, Cyberpunk Red, absolutely.
Yeah.
Players are enfranchised to kind of take on the world, and there is hope and a chance of winning, which I quite like.
The thing I love about Red in comparison to 2020 is that 2020 you were punks. Like, you were people flipping off the system knowing that the boot would come down and crush you, right? So it makes for these really interesting, like, in my head I always think of kind of Rogue One, like, love it or don't, but it's that feel of like, we are the rebellion and we're up against people who have much bigger guns than us and much bigger. They're organized and they have the equipment and the tech, and we're just a bunch of guys in like rags going, you know what? We are definitely going to die, but we're making a stand, and this is something we believe in. So you've got like, it's really tragic, but you know, still got that idealistic edge, but it's also more about kind of surviving, and then also like the facade, like you still got to buy into the world.
Yeah.
Whereas Red is a lot more like, hey, fuck it, like anything's game. Like, we have the opportunity to actually do something for ourselves now, as opposed to I need to either play the game or buck the system. And it's like, hey, I could make my own system.
Make my own system.
Do whatever I want.
I kind of envision it as a difference between the way that what's helped my brain is it's the difference between Alien and Aliens.
Yeah.
With Aliens very much just, they're all fucked, they're going to die,
Yeah.
this alien's going to wipe through everyone. And Aliens is like, nah, give them bigger guns.
Yep.
Put more aliens in it, high stakes, but you have a chance.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's really exciting in terms of writing a campaign. Which, when I wrote Going Mainstream for Cyberpunk 2020, I was really on that kind of train of like, what's the best thing these punks can do? And that's a giant fuck you to the system, which is get on TV, get on the net and just go, or the web or the vids, and just go, we're here, we exist.
Yeah.
Fuck you. We may be under the boot, but we're here. And that's a message to everyone else out there who feels the same way.
We did it under your noses,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And as futile as that is, it's worth it. It's worth, you know, telling people out there that they're not alone.
Yeah, 2020 is like lighting the spark.
Whereas here we can start a fire. So I got a bit inspired after we talked about what we liked about the system, and we talked about what we liked about the setting. And as you were saying before, the corporations don't have the big boot on your face anymore. It's quite explicit in the World Book that the corporations are around, but they're much diminished. The state governments and powers that be have learned the lessons of the past and said, okay, we need your resources, but step out of line and we'll curb you.
Because Arazaka has been banished back to Japan.
Yeah.
Militech has now been nationalized under the government. There are a few places like Petrochem and a few others that do have a minimized kind of role in Night City.
Biotechnica, which is a bit of you'll see as a bit of a player in the campaign in Feed the Beast. As a little preview, they are around, but Biotechna has a contract to do some stuff.
They have a leash kind of thing.
But yeah, there's a leash on them. And so I started to try and work out, what would be a really exciting way for our punks to carve out their own space in this. What would they do? I thought, they would be idealistic. They would say, hey, why don't we actually set up something that we've always talked about, which is something anarchist, something punk, something horizontal, a collective. And so I created this faction called the Dreamers. And they're these guys, they've got a dream. They've got a dream for a society that leverages technology, leverages the data sharing capabilities of this new world to organize in a way that doesn't need explicit leaders, that doesn't need a hierarchy, where no one is systemically pushing down on the others. And to house themselves, they've claimed a bastion of the old world, this old skyscraper, and semi-ironically, they've named it Heaven.
What?
Yeah, and so they've lent into this idea that everybody is like, this is a pipe dream. And they're like, yeah, that's right. It's a utopia.
There are problems with it, yes.
Cool.
That's pretty.
Let's work through
that's
them.
pretty socialist leaning, Comrade Phil.
I gave these guys the cast a setting. I wrote all this stuff up and how I envisaged it and what the place looks like and who lives there. I haven't had a chance to speak to you guys about what you thought about it.
I freaking love it, man.
Cool.
Because I think it's that thing of it's not that far removed. I say socialism. There are communities who are out there trying to do these things, right? Little kind of communes and people who are doing guerrilla gardening. And when I was in Switzerland a few years ago, you see community gardens where it's kind of like a trust system and everyone's kind of like pooling together and making these little things for themselves because it's for the good of everyone. And you see a lot of people in this world now who are trying to do things that are good for others. It's just like we are still in a world where corporations do kind of run everything. And while we're trying to do those things, it's not always achievable to go out there and become a community, right? Because we're still under these kind of structures of normalcy. And so in the world of Red, where everything's kind of like blown to, starting at zero, I think it would be great for this idea of people to be like, now we can actually do these things. We don't have to try and, tempt people away from this corporate life. There's nothing to go back to, so we might as well go forward.
And it's something that I've kind of said over and over, which is I fucking love world building. I love a really kind of hyper-realized lore. And this thing of to give context, we were given as Phil said, a 16-page prologue to the Bible. We don't get the Bible, but we get everything that comes before it. And there's really this is what's on this level. This is what's on this level. This is this person. This is where this person hangs out. This is the history behind the place. It's a really sound structure for us. And it's why I adore something like the Mass Effect universe. And why I read every piece of codex that's there, because I just want to absorb everything so that even if I don't retain every minute detail, it's there and it can be picked up. And so I have complete confidence that I can walk into this area and Phil will go, this is the circumstance of this area. This is what would happen if you were to walk in, because you have such a good grasp on it. And as you said, you've written thousands upon thousands of words. So it's
I also
there.
want you to have that good grasp on it, such that it feels like an everyday place for you, such that when we bring you guys, the audience, in, we don't have to tell you explicitly how it works. You'll see how Spitfire, how Sprocket, and how Wax spend their time here, and through them you'll get to know the place.
Yeah, it's one thing to show us a place or show us a setting or a world. It's another thing to have the things in place of how we got here.
Yeah.
That is, you're so right, Sean. I love those kind of BioWare codexes, especially in Dragon Age Origins. I would devour that stuff because I'm it isn't just a thing where it's an arbitrary rule of elves are enslaved people.
Yes.
You're how, why, what were they before, what's their history, and what history has been lost. Like,
It's like the Witcher world as well.
Totally.
Yeah,
and none of that may get touched on in the game, like in these games as well, but it's there. And even if they never get like realized or spoken about in the game or the podcast or whatever, like it's there if you need it and if you want it.
And hey, you may, I don't know what I plan to do with it yet, but maybe one day you out there can get your hands on Feed the Beast. And
for the low price of $5.
yeah, that's right. and you can have a look at the setting that we've come up with and make your own stories in it, or follow the story that we've made and have your own little piece of heaven.
If you should be so lucky, listeners.
Mate, I'm just really inspired by what you've done. I'm super fucking keen to play this game.
Cool.
There's so much that you've worked on. You gave us how many pages?
This is
the setting?
we have 16
16 pages of a setting book that you have written, which is what?
So it's a campaign book. It's 53 pages.
53 pages.
Wow.
So
It's just like 12,000 words.
There's
or something.
16,000 words.
And it is, just looking at it across the table, I can't read what's in there because otherwise spoilers, but it looks pretty dense in a good way, detailed and clear. So I am super fucking keen to play this game. I'm keen to feed the beast or not feed the beast.
Yes.
I'm interested to see what Wax does. I'm interested to see what my Patriots do.
This is what I want to finish with. We're going to meet these characters in the world, but it'd be nice to give a little bit of a taste of who they are without giving everything away. Who is Wax?
Wax is a young 20-something-year-old netrunner. He's a cool guy. He
Like you, Chris.
yeah, exactly.
When I think I think McConaughey.
When you think me, you think of a nervous wreck. No, I am a nervous man, nerdy man as well. No, Wax is a cool guy. He's a netrunner. He's lived on the West Coast all his life. I've taken inspirations from some late 80s films like Point Break.
Yep.
Bill and Ted, sort of
Keanu
scene.
Reeves, what's up?
A lot of Keanu Reeves.
None of which I've seen.
So there's some interesting stuff going on. He's a chill dude. He's a cool dude.
Very popular with the ladies.
He's very popular with the ladies.
Yes.
And the
men.
lads.
The life path system makes a return in Red, which is a very popular part of 2020, where you can roll on tables and it generates events from your life. And
Did you roll randomly?
I rolled randomly and I just got romantic partner after romantic partner all in my enemies section.
yeah.
So Wax has a lot of spurned lovers.
Yes.
For different reasons. It's
Mainly
not all
because
the
he
same
can't be
thing.
tied down, right?
Hey, man.
Do you have all them named?
When
He
you
just
got wings,
goes
you
with
got,
the
when you
flow.
got wings, you got to fly, baby.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know all
You don't
these
have your
names?
wings.
do
You
have
don't
all
have your
names.
wings
God.
yet.
I don't
Don't
have
have your wings.
Not yet. Maybe. But anyway, Wax is a net runner. He's been doing it for a while. He's a freelancer, and he's here because he believes in heaven. Spoilers.
What about Spitfire? Tell us a little about Spitfire.
Oh, Spitfire James is a techie, as I said. He's a bit of a scavenger techie. He's 25. He was born in 2020, and he kind of grew up in a corporate world. His parents were corporate members of Militech, and he basically eventually found himself on the streets. He abandoned his parents. He abandoned
Yeah, it was by choice. He didn't
Yeah.
like their lifestyle.
He very much he was very much
left.
at odds in it, and he lived on the streets, and he kind of scavenged that way. So he, over the past year or so, has found himself in heaven. Unlike someone like Wax, he isn't all the way on board. He hasn't cashed all his chips in yet. He believes that heaven means well, and he believes in some of their ideals, but it's taken him a little while to kind of come on board with that. The reason he's there is his grammar. His grammar, called grammar.
Yeah,
Grammar.
and you spell it Gramma, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I left that spelling up to Phil, and I just said it's grammar, like grammar as in spelling.
Yeah.
And he rolled with it, which is great.
It's like, hey, grammar. And
Yeah.
I will, after we get around the characters, I'll briefly talk about the NPCs and stuff as well and how they came about. But she's Spitfire's grammar and she's everybody's grammar, which
She's
is really
everyone's
nice.
grammar, and she's also just this hard-nosed, hard-boiled, but also loving
73-year-old.
Yeah, and we'll give you advice whether you want it or not. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, if you want to take it, it's fine.
Or kick
whatever.
your ass if you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, one of the inspirations, this is a deep cut, but it's a Rat Trap from the Beast Wars series.
Oh, cool.
So if anyone's ever
Crickets.
if you're a cricket's my ass, Miss
Wars is-
no one
it's
understands your references
fine
ever.
series.
It's an awesome series.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's that kind of nervous energy, but also someone that is also kind of confident and will just talk themselves into a hole, sink or swim.
Yeah.
So you've based them off me.
Yeah. You're my hero.
An aspect I like about Spitfire is that he's something of a machine whisperer. I like the idea that he prefers machines because they're much easier to understand than people.
People are shit.
There's some fleshed out rules in Red for how people deal with losing touch with their humanity as they put more and more metal and tech in their bodies, and it's done in a very sensitive, very scientific way that looks at yes, it's gamified, but it has grounding in real kind of dissociation that people go through, and I think that's a really cool aspect of Spitfire.
All I'll say is Spitfire already has a lot of tech implanted into himself. He liked to make alterations to his body.
Yes,
and he has.
Yes,
he's got an internal agent. Like, why do you need that?
I want to mention that as well. We'll get to agents in a second. Let's talk about Sprocket first.
Okay, so Sprocket Volkov is she's a teenage nomad, kind of newish to heaven. It's kind of like she's taking a sabbatical from kind of her nomad life, kind of like you know how the Amish they do. Is it Rumspringer?
That's what it's called. Yeah.
Where they kind of like get to spend life living outside of the community. So she's kind of like taking a stand on her own 2 feet. She's a teenager, so she's trying to see where she fits in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And where she doesn't quite fit in the world is with her family, which is the traveling Volkov circus. So and I did roll this, by the way. I didn't just choose it because it fits with my aesthetics. Just don't come at me, people. I rolled this. You can roll for what your Moto family is, and it was circus. And I was like, oh man, that's great.
Fantastic.
I love that.
Is that on the Nomad table? Like,
yeah.
That's great.
So they're like an old school kind of family circus. They're good people. You know, they're family business run. They take people in. They seem very gruff and scary, but really they're all kind of teddy bears.
They're carnies.
They're carnies, essentially. But Sprocket doesn't really have any skills that kind of makes her circus friendly.
Yeah.
So basically she's kind of like the tank of the group. She has very high body, very high reflexes and dex. She has skills in heavy guns, driving, and Aikido. We're using martial arts in the Cyberpunk Red system.
So
she's
dope.
Yeah, she's like this tanked up girl who is very good at fighting and gunning and stuff.
And driving,
and her family are just like, Sprocket, why can't you learn instrument? And she's like, that's not me, Papa. Why can't you see me for me?
And they try to teach you to dance, the old Russian dances, and you just got eight left feet.
Yep, she's so clumsy. And she's the one thing I love about Sprocket, and this is one thing I wanted to do after playing 2020, is that, you know, obviously Cassie Glass was very cool, very calm, very collected.
Smooth.
Smooth. Whereas Sprocket is nuts. She's a teenager.
Yeah.
She's awkward as all heck. She's got a cool of I think it's 2.
Really
she's got
dumped your
she's
cool
got a cool of 2.
I thought mine was better. I'm 5.
Not whereas I think Cassie, I had a cool of 9.
9 or 10 or something.
Out.
Can you tell us a little bit about the affectation that she has as
Do
well?
you mean Vladimir?
Vladimir. Yes, I do mean Vladimir.
So, in your fashion affectations, you get all these different things, and I rolled small shoulder animal. So I've given her a few stats in animal handling as well, because obviously the Volkovs have animals. They're a circus, and they do well enough that they are able to find and procure animals.
The old animal, here and there, yeah.
And so she's got a little shoulder rat called Vlad.
Gorgeous.
Vlad, attack.
Yeah, he's a little grey and white rat that kind of lives on her shoulders. So she's very sweet, even though she's pretty much a killing machine. Yeah, so I'm just very excited to play this kind of awkward, silly character.
So what I did was I asked these guys to take these characters and gave them the parameter that they have found each other while living and working at Heaven and taken it upon themselves to form this little team that specializes in going out and reclaiming tech for Heaven and for their community, for the Dreamers. So you've got Sprocket, who drives, getaway driver, and gets you there, and also is the muscle. You've got Wax, who will hack into the net of, whatever disused facility or corporate place that they go into and unlock the tech. And then you've got Spitfire to actually get the tech working and get on site and be able to assess what's valuable, get it going, and then get out of there. So they've been on a couple of missions before when we joined them, and they're already this team that's working together. The other thing I asked them to do was create some of the NPCs. So some of the people you meet in heaven are their creation. We got a retired strong woman from the circus called Brunhilde, who is a nomad archetype. We've talked about grammar already, and Chris, you came up with a tech called, you gave her the name...
Lisa,
yeah. So she's a big sister type that you kind of gave, who has kind of a center of competence and solidity, which is a really nice character to have in the background as well. And then I added a few of my own. And finally, I want to talk about agents. Now, agents are a new thing they added in. If you listen to our interview with Mike, he talked about agents being this really exciting thing that he wanted to include originally. And they're basically a juiced up smartphone, your personal Siri, right? Or even a pared down version of the OS from her, where it's your personal assistant who has a personality and learns from you what it is you need tracking from your, whether you need more incendiary ammunition for setting people on fire or, groceries. Your agent will manage your life. And as such, I've asked each of you to come up with a personality for your agent and how you use it. And so as a last thing, tell us like how your agent works and what it sounds like.
Yeah, so because Sprocket's very young and obviously circus roots, hers is kind of like what do you call them? Like a circus spruiker?
A barker.
Yeah, like a barker. Like, and this is what's going to happen today, Sprocket, blah, blah, blah. And like,
get out of bed!
Yeah. That's kind of very positive and makes her feel like every day is an adventure,
Fantastic.
essentially.
I kind of liken her to Kate Winslet from Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Can be very, very snarky, but very charismatic and charming. But, has that little banter back and forth, take it down a peg. And it's an internal agent. So unlike the others, I'm pretty sure Spitfire has his internally. So he hears it in his
brain.
head and everything is kind of projected around and for him.
Really kind of extra aspect to the agent part. I like it.
Wax has a very breathy woman as
Shocker.
his agent, who says things like, "Hey, it's going to be 36 degrees Celsius today, sweetie. Make sure you wear something nice." It's very soothing.
Maybe some shorts and a
Maybe
tank.
something. You look great. You look great every day, though.
Here's something to stroke his ego.
Massages his ego. Lovely.
Massages his ego and keeps him happy when he wakes up and gets ready for the day. It inspires him to be the best him.
So twist, they also become exes by the end of this.
I was thinking that, yeah.
Maybe it's an AI, who knows?
That reminds me of one thing. One thing I did want to quickly mention before we wrap this up. I am a British Australian. I work in Celsius, meters, and to me, the bottom floor is the ground floor and the one above it is the first floor.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Americans. I
Wait,
cannot change now.
Is that a thing? Ground floor is not ground floor for Americans?
In America, the ground floor is the ground floor or first floor.
No,
and
that's
the
wrong.
one above it is the second floor.
That's wrong.
And the third floor. That's how That's how North Americans do it. Canadians do it the same way. That's how I've written it in my book. I'm sorry if that confuses you. At the top of the podcast, I just wanted to mention that. You may have to have your conversion open if you want to know how far away things are.
Just use meters, you goddamn...
Please.
I apologize to no one.
By 2045, they've gone metric.
Yep.
That's just what's
Finally.
happened.
We also suspect that the accents that we do for American, well, if there any deviation to your natural accent, say you live in California and you're offended or confused by my Californian accent, that's actually a prediction. That's 25 years in the future. That's actually how they're going to sound. You're going to adopt a lot of Australianisms.
Similar for Russian. I mean, she works in a circus, so like it's a big melting pot is the way I'm explaining it.
I only apologize to either Christian Slater or Heath Ledger. Or whoever voiced Rat Trap in The Beast Wars.
Basically, what we're saying is we're right. And we
Die
apologize
mad.
for any extra work you might have to do, but we hope you enjoy.
I
Yes. Oh, and the final thing, they did ask me to mention this. We have one house rule that we use in combat when we run combat, and that is called dynamic initiative. So when we run combat in Red, instead of one initiative roll, and that's set, Each new round, we'll re-roll initiative and go with that order just to reflect the shifting and dynamic nature of a second-by-second battlefield.
Cool.
So yeah, if you are a little confused, that's a house rule. Feel free to use it yourselves as well. But that is our introduction to Red. I am so excited to bring this to you guys. I'm so excited to bring you guys the campaign. Come back. We'll see you in Night City once again.
Thanks, Artelzorian. And,
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you.
See you in Night City.
See ya.
See you in heaven.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Roll to Cast Feed the Beast is a Baby Beard Media production. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all our podcasts are on Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcatchers. You can support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/babybeard. Cyberpunk Red and all associated properties are trademark of R. Telsorian Games. Used with permission.